Vulcha, welcome back to Irish Granny Tarot. We haven't done much tarot yet, but we will. We're doing Stoned, Jewelry Obsession and How Desire Shapes the World by Asia Raden. I got wax all over me. We're on part 4, the French Bleu. 69 karat sapphire, blue, diamond. So it's a diamond, but it's the color sapphire that glowed red in the sunlight. In the mid-17th century, it was stolen from the third eye of an Indian idol in a Hindu temple. It was sold to the Sun King, Louis XIV, and was said to be cursed because it was stolen. In 1812, a London diamond dealer cut it down and reshaped it to 45.52 carats from 69. In 1823, it ended up with the Dutch banker Henry Philip Hope. Sound familiar? It sold in 1910 to Cartier, but there were no buyers from Cartier. It was bought finally by a crazed heiress, Evelyn Walsh McLean. She was a flapper. She apparently, I don't know, sounds to me like she was manic, maybe a little bipolar going on there. She would dance naked on tables at parties with only the diamond on. She had her dog wear it in his collar. She was absolutely out of control as a young woman. And she was warned about this curse, and she scoffed at it. While she wore it to the Kentucky Derby one year, one of her children died suddenly of a fever. And then her other daughter killed herself. And then her husband died of alcoholism and gambling, and she went into complete debt and died at the age of 60, broke and addicted to cocaine. Died of pneumonia. Tragic story. Harry Winston bought the Hope diamond, and he couldn't sell it either. He made a big narrative out of the curse and sent the diamond on tour to make some money off of it. He donated it to the Smithsonian, where he got his own Harry Winston gallery, and it all became a big tax write-off. I've seen the Hope diamond. I didn't get too close. I knew about the curse. It's beautiful. Many jewels are cursed. They all have this mythology around them because what does it do? It increases their value for some people. The Black Orloff, 195 carat black diamond, was taken from the Eye of Brahma. In 1932, the first dealer who bought it jumped off a skyscraper in New York City. 2 different Russian princesses owned it, one after another, and both of them jumped out of tall buildings as well. That's a weird coincidence. The 194 carat white Orloff was another Eye of Brahma. Apparently Brahma had a number of eyes. This was given to Queen Catherine II of Russia, and she eventually lost her throne in the and her jewels in the revolution, but that's a bit of a stretch, I think. The Koh-i-Noor diamond was equal to the value of 1 day of food for all of the people in the world. It was given to Queen Victoria when she was made Empress of India. These stories of curses are really morality tales. I would say, I think that's being generous. I think that they're to attract attention and make the jewels more valuable. But Asia says that they're often morality tales. Were Marie Antoinette's diamonds cursed? Well, maybe all really big diamonds are. Bad things inevitably seem to happen to the people who own, covet, or seek them. As for the necklace that started the French Revolution, Villette was exiled. This is her buddy. Lamotte's buddy. Lamotte may have escaped from prison and penned a book, but she ended up jumping or being thrown from a window in London not long afterward. Marie Antoinette and Madame du Barry both lost their heads. The jewelers went bankrupt. The abused became the abusers. And the revolution inadvertently gave birth to Napoleon. Perhaps in the end, the only real curse is greed. Now, we're on chapter 5 called Hello Sailor. How sibling rivalry and a really big pearl shaped the fate of the nations. And in honor of this next story, I wore my pearls because I didn't have 185 carat diamond, and I don't really like sapphires. I didn't have any sapphires. I actually have a little tiny emerald, but that's another story. So let us go on. Oh, I should show you my pearl ring. Isn't it lovely? When you admire my rings, which I know you will, keep in mind that this cost the king's ransom of 88 cents at Walmart. So, La Peregrina, the pear-shaped pearl. Peregrina means the pilgrim or the wanderer, like the peregrine falcon. It's a pear-shaped 200 grain pearl, which is about 10 grams, and it's shaped like a pear. It was found in the mid-1500s off the coast of Santa Margarita, Gulf of Panama, by a slave, and he brought it to Don Pedro de Tenez, the administrator of the Spanish colony in Panama, who immediately freed the slave. It was then given to the Spanish king. El Inca saw this pearl, the size and shape of a muscadine pear, and Philip I sent it to Mary I of England as a betrothal gift. It was suspended from La Grande, a square-cut, must be La Grande. These are Spanish, not French. Square-cut diamond. Mary was enamored of Philip, who she'd seen, I guess, a painting of. She was a 40-year-old virgin, and she wore this all the time as a symbol of her betrothal to Philip. And her half-sister Elizabeth I wanted it. So now we're setting up for a little sibling rivalry here. It eventually became a Valentine's gift from Richard Burton to Elizabeth Taylor in 1969. Mary left the pearl to Philip in her will because she hated her sister Elizabeth and didn't want her to get the pearl. Philip proposed to Elizabeth and she said no, so he took the pearl back to Spain and gave it to his new wife. Elizabeth was insulted, and she was insulted that she lost out on the pearl. She didn't want Philip. And she began letting these English ships, remember the privateers, she began letting these English ships maraud the Spanish ships. The privateers were employed by the crown, and what she wanted was for them to find the pearl. Piracy became a political and economic strategy. The privateers became national heroes. Philip, in response, built the Armada, which was tens of thousands of soldiers in many ships. It was eventually decimated by England, and it ended Spanish dominance of the sea. So we're going to take a deep dive into that, pardon the pun. Henry VIII was an asshole. These are not my words. I'm quoting the book. YouTube. So he had married Catherine of Aragon, whose daughter was Mary. Catherine was sickly, and she was not respected by Henry VIII. She was very religious and kind of passive, and he not attractive, and she had a daughter, not a son. So he wanted to dispense with her, wanted to divorce her. That fight turned into the Church of England. Elizabeth was the daughter of his girlfriend, Anne Boleyn, and Anne Boleyn was a Protestant. So Henry ditched Catherine and his daughter Mary, and the first thing he did was separate the mother and child, which is just, that's a very Trumpian thing to do. And this family split became a conflict that turned into the old world versus the new era, the modern commercial era of the golden age. This is really, this personal animosity flared into something larger than anybody. At the time, jewels signaled wealth and status and rank and diplomacy and contracts. Henry showered Anne with jewels, but she wanted the crown jewels. And she gave him his first and only son, Edward, who, let's see, I was going to say he was born in 168, but I believe I was referring to the page. Henry expressed his love for his son, the only way he ever did, in carrots. A letter from Edward to his father read, quote, "I also thank you that you have given me great and costly gifts, as chains, rings, jeweled buttons, neck chains and breastpins, and necklaces and garments, and very many other things. In which things and gifts is conspicuous your fatherly affection towards me. For if you did not love me, you would not give me these fine gifts of jewelry." Sad. Both sisters resembled their mothers. Mary was religious, plain, not given to being in the forefront of the court. And Anne Boleyn's daughter Elizabeth was attractive, charismatic for the time, charismatic and very much engaged in the life of the court. And Henry had to ditch them as reminders of their mothers. He could not look at Mary or at Elizabeth and not think of his marital history. So he made Mary a servant to Elizabeth, which is just really humiliating. Anne considered Mary a threat to her and Elizabeth's position, and even had wanted to name Elizabeth Mary when she was born, and Henry wouldn't let her. Anne made sure that Elizabeth was exalted with fancy fabrics and fancy jewels, presented as a princess from the very beginning, a queen in waiting, and Mary was always dressed and treated as lowly as possible. So Anne miscarried a boy, and Henry believed the lies and tortured the adulterers that Anne was accused of having, and executed them, including Anne's brother. She was accused of incest with her brother. He declared Elizabeth bastard. He beheaded Anne. He became engaged to Jane Seymour the next day, and Jane was the mother of Edward. She died 2 weeks after Edward's birth. She probably died of puerperal fever infection from birth. Ugh, that's terrible. So she died. So now he's got this infant, and he's been rid himself of 2 problematic wives. Nature did the third. So a marriage was arranged with Anne of Cleves. I believe she was from Holland, Belgium. This marriage was purely political. He saw her and freaked out because she was just unattractive. Oh, Belgium. He called her the Flanders mare, and he was forced to marry her. And she turned out to be a really good stepmother and a really good wife. But Henry thought she was ugly and wanted nothing to do with her and demanded a divorce. And she was smart. She agreed immediately. She got a palace, she got a title, and she kept her head. 16 days later, he married Catherine Howard, Anne Boleyn's cousin, who was 30 years younger than he, and had the reputation for being quite the social butterfly. She was 10 years younger than Mary, so she's younger than his own daughter. And she went out of her way to humiliate her. She had many lovers, and she was eventually executed for that. So he married Catherine Parr, and Catherine Parr was 31. She'd been widowed twice before. She was a good stepmother, and she actually got Henry to reconcile with Mary and Elizabeth to make some sort of family peace. While I'm thinking of it, there's a good series of books about the court of Henry VIII, about this whole time period, by a writer called Hilary Mantel, and I forget now the names of the books because that's expecting quite a bit. But I'll try to remember to look them up after I finish this video. Mary was called Bloody Mary for her persecution of Protestants because she hated Elizabeth. And, Mary had taken over, and because of, Henry died, and she went after the Protestants, and she put Elizabeth under kind of a fancy house arrest. Mary was a religious conservative, and Elizabeth was a progressive freethinker. Mary was paranoid and unstable and rigid and burned many people at the stake. Elizabeth was clever and adaptable. So Edward had died of TB. Mary was on the throne, and she believed vox populi vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God. So she sounds like a whole lot of fun. Mary was distant and aloof to the people. They would go out in public and she'd just ride her horse and put her nose up. People would cheer and she'd look away. Elizabeth was gracious. It's kind of like a Kamala versus Diana type of situation. So Elizabeth was gracious and a big show woman. She made the best of a situation in public to be given more attention and love. Mary reinstated her mother's marriage, delegitimizing Elizabeth because, if he was still married to Catherine of Aragon and the relationship with Anne Boleyn wasn't legitimate, then Elizabeth was a bastard. And she made the court very Catholic, and Elizabeth wouldn't even pretend to go along with that. Elizabeth was unjustly implicated in Protestant rebellions that were led by Thomas Wyatt, and she was sent to the Tower of London. Mary could find no evidence against Elizabeth, and after 3 months of imprisonment, she was released to home confinement in her estate under guard. Mary finally gave in to religious pressure that women should not rule alone, and she fell in love with this picture of Philip II of Spain. Well, England freaked out about Spanish influence in the British court. They didn't want her to marry a Spaniard and be under Spanish rule. Philip ordered Elizabeth released and ordered the sisters to reconcile, and had a very intense prenup for Mary and sent La Peregrina, the pearl, and Elizabeth was all jealous and she wanted it. And pearls, the story of pearls is very interesting. Pearls are the oldest gemstone. They symbolize the moon, they symbolize love, purity. Many cultures believe that pearls are the tears of the goddess in the moonlight. Isn't that beautiful? Really pretty. In ancient Rome, only the highest class were allowed to wear pearls. It was the sumptuary laws that Augustus passed. Only the nobility could wear them. In medieval France, Italy, and Germany, only the aristocracy could wear pearls. They were equated to the divine and kept for religious purposes. In Rome, pearls were dedicated to Venus. You see pictures of Venus emerging from the half shell, the pearl. The Greeks believed that the pearls were droplets of water from Aphrodite's body as she emerged from the sea. Isis was represented by the pearl. The pearl maiden was respected, venerated in China. Shininess is next to godliness, Asia says. Pearls are mineralized deposits of secretions, kind of like a kidney stone. The oyster, the mollusk, gets an injury or an infection, and it secretes nacre, a solution with nacre in it, and mother of pearl. And the oyster's body surrounds this and coats it, and it builds it in layers like an onion. And when light enters a pearl, it's diffused by all these different layers, and it kind of glows from within. But pearls are rare, they're hard to find, hard to get, and therefore valuable, or at least they were. So many pearls were found in America that it became known as the land of pearls for a while, the New World. From 1515 to 1545, more new pearls were found in the New World than at any time in the world before or since. They were considered the most valuable and royal. At their wedding, 20 cartloads of Spanish gold were dragged through the streets of London when Philip and Mary were married, July 25th, 1554. Philip hated England and Mary, and he hated the fact that the British would not crown him when they crowned her. He did not consider himself a queen's consort. He was the son of an emperor. And a few months after the wedding, Mary got pregnant. But she wasn't really pregnant. It was a false pregnancy. And this happened 2 more times. And she went increasingly more mentally ill. She started burning more and more people. She executed over 300 people by burning them at the stake. And she had false labor. And when she went into labor, Philip met with Elizabeth and gave her a diamond worth $23 million in today's money. Years later, Elizabeth told people, Philip fell in love with me. So Philip, realizing that Mary was once again not giving birth to a baby, was disgusted, and used this disgust. He made an excuse that he was going back to Spain to help sort things out in Spain. They weren't going well. So he was gone for 2 years. Then he came back and he asked Mary for money to pay for a Spanish war with the Habsburgs. And in the process, not only did they lose all the money, but they lost Calais, which was the last British, English ownership on the French side of the water. Philip got the message that Mary was dying. And so in response to the message that Mary was dying, he sent a letter proposing to Elizabeth. And she said, no, thank you. And so the whole situation of Spain against England, because this, of course, this was the last straw between England and Spain. The animosity was thick. The humiliation was great. And all because Henry VIII went to war with the Catholic Church. So Mary had helped ameliorate the situation, but Elizabeth had immediately got it all fired up again. And when Mary died, Philip took the pearl and went back to Spain. Elizabeth still wanted the pearl and got these pirateers out in the waters trying to hunt it down. Pearls also symbolize marriage, the Virgin Mary, purity, and the soul. The pearly gates of heaven. Elizabeth had pearls everywhere. They were used in that particular case, her wearing them, as a sign of strength against the Spanish. Let's see here. In one instance during the peak of tensions, right in front of the Spanish ambassador, a loyal British nobleman withdrew from the pocket of his velvet breeches a pearl worth 15,000 pounds, pulverized it, dropped it into a glass of wine, and drank a toast to Queen Elizabeth of England and King Philip of Spain. He might as well have given him the finger Spain. It certainly would have cost less. And one famous story tells of Lady Howard, who arrived in court in a velvet dress adorned in pearl embroidery. When Elizabeth saw the dress, she was so taken with it that she asked to borrow it. The owner said yes, she had little choice. Unfortunately, Lady Howard was quite a bit shorter than Elizabeth. When the dress did not fit the Queen, Lady Howard was informed that if Elizabeth could not wear it, nobody else could either. Elizabeth refused to marry. She said that she was bound to a husband, the Kingdom of England. She covered her face in white on purpose and wore tons of pearls to symbolize her virginity and divinity and power. Gloriana was the cult of Elizabeth. It became a personality cult. All of her portraits had to follow a particular template with certain symbols of power, purity, and feminine Christianity. She had her accession day, the day she took the throne, named a state holiday. And there's a story around that. She turned it fanciful. Protestant propaganda fused with courtly love and chivalric and classic traditions to create the legend of Elizabeth as the vessel virgin of the Reformed religion, worshipped by her knights on the occasion of a new quasi-religious festival, her accession day. And unlike Marie Antoinette's sexual, economic, and moral guilt by association, Elizabeth took control of public perception and wielded it like a tool. She used some of the more positive moral connotations of jewelry to achieve a kind of reflected virtue. Cleopatra used emeralds to look rich and powerful. Elizabeth used pearls to look virginal and holy. Same game, different angle. But the emeralds belonged to Egypt. The pearls did not belong to England. They belonged to Spain. And Spain was not amused. There were all these stolen pearls, from the privateers, the private citizen navy, which was basically the strong arm for the state. So Elizabeth took a third of everything that they got. So she was raking in the pearls. The Vatican called her the patroness of heretics and pirates. They were known as gentlemen adventurers like Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh. And they were kind of like her Roger Stone or her Paul Manafort. Philip's plan was to do what he called achieve the Empresa de Inglaterra, the enterprise of England. He had benign envy. Elizabeth had benign envy. She didn't care what Spain had. She wanted her own colonies and her own wealth. Spain was nothing under her heel, in her opinion. Sir Walter Raleigh had gone to the New World and, in the name of Elizabeth, founded Roanoke in Virginia, named for Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, and it would be a staging ground for attacks on the Spanish. Francis Drake and John Hawkins went to the coast of Africa to harass the Spanish and the Portuguese. The worst piracy was by Francis Drake, who was known as El Draco, the dragon. In 1585, 21 ships with 2,000 men went to the Americas and attacked the Spanish colonies with Francis Drake in the Golden Hind. He circumnavigated the globe from 1577 to 1580, and all the way around he looted and pillaged, and he claimed California for England from Spain. And when he got back, Elizabeth knighted him on the Golden Hind, his ship. A loaded down Spanish galleon full of heavy gold and treasure was no match for a small, fast English ship. Spain was hemorrhaging treasure, and Elizabeth I had a cabinet in her room full of pearls. Piracy, they were considered heroes to the English and totally politically sanctioned by the Queen. They would never get in trouble for the crimes that they were committing. The Vatican sent a mandate to England for anyone to kill Queen Elizabeth I. It was justified as a religious action, but really it was about money and the pirates. But the Pope rose a cry to the Catholics that were left in England, not many of them, and all the Catholics of the world to get Queen Elizabeth. The papal bull, Regan's Excelsis, the papal bull excommunicated Queen Elizabeth I, and to all Catholics in Europe, she must be deposed. And it was open season on Elizabeth I. And this happened at the same time as the plot against her by her cousin Mary, the Queen of Scots, who was younger, cuter, wild, and next in line for the throne. So Mary, Queen of Scots, was forced to abdicate the Scottish throne to her son James because of her misbehaviors. And she went to Queen Elizabeth and asked for help to get back the Scottish crown. And Elizabeth held her for 19 years in captivity, wouldn't let her go back. She wrote to conspirators to overthrow Queen Elizabeth I and was turned in by a guy called Walsingham. She left notes in beer barrels that were sneaked away to Scotland, and he found them. Queen Elizabeth didn't want to get her hands dirty, so she decided that she couldn't decree what would happen to Mary, Queen of Scots, and said she would leave it to her cabinet, but they could take a hint. And Elizabeth took Mary's pearls, and the cabinet, they took her head. She was executed, and this execution gave Philip an excuse to invade England because Mary, Queen of Scots, was Catholic. And so Philip would go in the name of Spain to defend all Catholics by attacking the Protestant queen who killed the Catholic queen. And this was his Empresa de Inglaterra, the enterprise of England. Philip created the Armada to import a war. It wasn't meant to be a sea battle. It was meant to carry soldiers and weapons and horses for the land battle. Elizabeth I heard from it from her extensive network of spies. In fact, there's a portrait of her in a dress that has eyes and ears all over the dress. And it's a warning to everyone who sees the portrait that she has eyes and ears everywhere. I have yet to see that picture. I'm eager to see it. So she wanted to do a preemptive strike. She sent Francis Drake to Cadiz to destroy the Armada in the shipyards, and she changed her mind, but it was too late. He was already gone. And in April of 1587, that's exactly what they did. They destroyed the ships while they were being built. Philip started all over and finally sailed July 12, 1588, with 151 ships. Just imagine. They formed a gigantic crescent in the ocean, several miles across. They could only travel 2 miles an hour. They were not planning a sea battle. They were very overloaded with horses and servants and stuff. For a land war, they had 25,000 soldiers. The English fleet was a smaller number of ships, 140, but they were small ships. They held 10,000 men, privateers mostly, but they had unusually long-range cannons made to sink ships in open sea. The Lord High Admiral, Baron Howard of Effingham, I didn't make that up, was Queen Elizabeth's cousin. The Vice Admiral, the guy under him, was Francis Drake, which I'm sure the Admiral was not real crazy about, if I know anything about upper crust English. It was this weird combination. This army of English was nobles and pirates mixed together. They used piracy tactics. The Spanish used tactics from the olden days with these ships close together to prevent boarding by the enemy. But the English didn't want to board them. They just wanted to sink them. So they stayed out of reach and shot at them. They encountered the Armada. They shot from a distance. And as Francis Drake said, we pluck their feathers by little and little. The Armada plan was to meet up with the Duke of Parma from Italy and get 20,000 more soldiers, but they could not avoid the English ships. They had to anchor in Calais, and what the English did is they covered 8 of their own ships with pitch, turned them on fire, and pushed them into the harbor of Calais, right at the Armada ships, which were wooden and full of gunpowder, and caused a conflagration which really destroyed most of the Armada ships. Many tried to flee the harbor, and the English ships were able to shoot them. They could move in every direction. The Spanish ships couldn't back up. They could only go forward. So the Spanish ships had to flee forward, and the English herded them to Zeeland, where the water was shallow, and then there was a terrible storm. So on land, there had been 17,000 English people, fearful of the Spanish, who had 55,000, waiting for this big war to break out when the Spanish ships landed, and they knew that they were no match. But Queen Elizabeth tried to bolster their courage. She got all dressed up in white armament and went to talk to them and told them that she would fight right along their side, just like Trump did on January 6th. I thought I would add that. It's not in the book. In what was probably the greatest theatrical moment of her reign, the Queen donned a white velvet dress and a silver breastplate, and always the icon, rode out among the troops on a white horse to deliver one of English history's greatest battle speeches. She rallied her army, assuring them, quote, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart of a king and a king of England, too," and going on to promise them that she was resolved in the midst and heat of the battle to live or die amongst you all, to lay down for my God and for my kingdom and for my people my honor and my blood, even in the dust. She had no idea that the battle had already been won. The Armada was destroyed. Was forced to go around. To get home, it had to go around Scotland and Ireland. Many ships sank in the storms. And back home, half of the ships had been destroyed or sunken, and 20,000 soldiers were dead. English lost 8 ships and 0 men. Philip thought that Spain had earned God's disfavor. England made piracy a legitimate form of commerce. They built the largest mercantile empire since the Roman Empire with plunder, and the royals call it even today the firm. She never got La Peregrina, and she did start the East India Company, and by the time she was done, she ruled 2/5 of the world. So we will end there and start the next part. Now, was that was part 3, or was that part 4? Oh my God, I'll have to look it up. Excuse me. But we'll stop now and start chapter 6 at the next video. And thank you very much for watching. Sláinte.